So I'm like, what the heck? That's the question that kept coming to my mind, which is why that's what I titled the article, What the Heck is Going On with These Catalogs? What the heck is going on with these music catalogs? That's a question I asked myself in around 2022, 2023, when I saw that a lot of artists were selling their catalogs. And this was different from the conversation that I knew about catalog sales in the past. In the past, pre 2022, whenever I would hear about a music catalog, it would be from a legacy artist who was probably not generating as many sales anymore, and they were selling their catalog, or it was the estate of an artist who was no longer living, whose family, essentially the estate, was selling the catalog to maybe a music company, Sony, or something like that. But in 2022, I started to hear more about artists who were my generation, artists who I grew up listening to, artists who were freaking making music still, who were selling their catalogs. And I'm like, okay, I know I'm getting older, but I'm not getting that old. Why is Justin Timberlake selling his catalog? Like, what's that about? I started to just do some research. Started to do some deep dives into what was going on. And I think it was 2023 where I wrote that article on my Instagram and I shared it eventually on my website. But it was called What the Heck is Going On with These Catalogs? Because it had just gotten to a point where it was popping up on my, newsletters and my email and just different things every week. I'm like, Future? Like, why is Future selling his catalog? He's probably about to drop an album soon. And what's going on? And that's because I'm a naturally suspicious person. And I'm like, what's going on? You know? And I feel like a lot of the time, the conversation was centered around whether it was good for the artist or not, whether it was a matter of them selling their soul and a conversation about like the liquidity of the funds, like they're going to get that money now and they can invest it. That was a conversation. I remember thinking, okay, that's fine. You know what I'm saying? We could debate that all day, every day. But who's buying these? Like, that was the question that popped up in my head. And who is buying these at such astronomical rates? Because we were seeing catalogs being sold for like nine figures. We were seeing undisclosed, estimations. I'm like, who's buying these? Like, and what value does it provide to them? How does it serve them to have this catalog? Everyone's talking about how streaming, yes, it did save the music industry, but it doesn't make as much money as a CD would. And we're not in the era where the, music industry is booming the way it was before. A picture of the music business revenue from 1973 to 2023. When it's adjusted for inflation, we're not where we were in the early 2000s and the late 90s. Obviously, I realized that a lot of the catalogs were being bought up by companies that were backed by investment firms. A lot of these companies were new. A lot of these companies were came out of nowhere. You would see things like a company called I Like Songs, LLC, but it's backed by one of the biggest financial institutions, investment firms, whatever, capital firms in the freaking world. And you're like, okay. And so if you're this new company that's coming out of nowhere and you're a small company, but you're obviously backed by this huge financial institution, and you look at the people who are owning the company or who are working and they're like finance guys, are you really that much more equipped than an artist who's been in the music industry and their team to generate revenue off of that catalog? Because it was different if it was freaking Sony, if it's Universal Music buying your catalog back from you or something, you know that they have the infrastructure to make that make money. But I Like Music LLC, it's not necessarily that. And that was proven because I later found out that some of these companies, if they cared enough to actually expand in the music business, were trying to scout people who worked in business in the music business to kind of lead that department. So the motive and the intention wasn't musical, right? It was financial. And it's something that I've obviously been thinking about for a long time. It's 2026 now, so it's been 4 years. I've been watching it evolve. And at this point, it's become clear that it is a matter of financial holdings. Like these catalogs are assets, and these institutions, these firms are using the ownership of these assets to, in some ways, inflate their net worth and their value. So now you can say I'm worth 1.1 billion because you have an asset which is 500 million and it's Celine Dion's catalog, right? Which you bought it for. But you know what I'm saying? So it really ends up boiling down to an ability to trade. Like if we know, especially in the US and these like Western global markets, we're not always dealing with real money. We're dealing with the concept of money. And so you are able to now pivot and get more loans, get more, not loans, I'm sorry, so broke people talk, get more investments and pivot to a different industry like AI or like whatever else people are going to be investing in large amounts because you were able to hold your money in this market, which is the music industry. And I say that because that it's true, but also because when the conversation about catalogs really became more mainstream, they were positioned as these alternative investments. These investments were not as reactive to the market as other investments. The music industry operated in a silo. No matter what's happening in the world, people are going to listen to music. And so it was positioned as a very safe investment that you can store your money in. And people were like, bet. They were running it up. Interest rates were low in the country in 2022. And I think that once they started to rise, catalog sales declined. Once I think Biden administration, during the Biden administration, the Fed dropped interest rates and catalog sales started to increase. And there was such a stark difference in the people who were purchasing catalogs during that first round and the second round. And that's what I started to pay attention to as well. I noticed that people who were investing the first time were I Like Music LLC and these companies who were buying catalogs directly off of artists. And it was a big thing. Like every day you're seeing articles, such and such sold this, such and such, such and such, such and such. You're like, okay, cool. And it pivoted after that break, and people were investing in music catalogs again. That was around 2024. You were seeing that catalogs were being traded. So it was like I like music ends up consolidating with something else, and now they're buying the rights from Music Rocks LLC, and then now it was something like Sony or um, Warner is buying the catalog from I Like Music, bigger firms, these bigger entities, and buying catalogs from other bigger entities. And it was a more of like a collection. So the artists were no longer just getting the bag the way that it was. And whenever an artist would directly purchase whenever an artist would directly sell a catalog, it was huge, right? So then we income the Taylor Swift of it all, where she finally buys back her masters, and that she did that in tandem with, an investment capital firm, whatever asset management firm, and they're big things, right? We're not talking about artists who had their heyday and we're not talking about that. We're not talking about artists that we're talking about the big money makers and how are you going to participate in the market at scale. Like that's where it started shifting after 2024, around 2024. And that even confirmed more how I was like, okay, I knew I wasn't crazy because going back to what I was saying earlier, I really didn't care so much about whether it was a matter of like selling your soul or, this is your right creativity, your ownership. To me, it was more so, what is the incentive, right? Is there something that we don't know? It's like, are we pivoting from streaming into some real money? Has the music industry started to actually figure out how to make bread? And I know that someone's like, the music industry makes bread, but like I said, I'm comparing it to the patterns, and I know that it's not where it was before. So what's the lucrative, like, catch? What's the secret? What's the secret? And I was like, oh, it's not a secret. They're just moving money around. Okay. So now it takes me back to the drawing board a little bit, because I'm like, okay, my objective is to identify that way, like that secret, like where is the music industry going to start making money again? Can it? Because what they're putting out, like, oh, experiential, blah, blah, blah. No, no one cares about that. We've been getting experiences for free. And so now you trying to charge for it doesn't feel sustainable. But that answered my question. Oh yeah, it's just asset management. That's all it boils down to right now, asset management. I can talk about this a lot. I think about it a lot. It's just my one of the running questions throughout my career in the industry, the relationship between the assets and like the financial part of it, and then the actual artist. Anyway, this is Sincerely Latifa, where we explore entertainment topics one day at a time. If you have not subscribed, feel free to subscribe, like, comment, share if you're interested.